across your user interface, and then you just pull the trigger. That's about it. The Javelin is as dead simple as launchers come.
There's also a couple of modes, but it's
Yeah.
not really critical.
Yeah, I think that there's only two. There's direct fire and top down.
Oh, that's a couple.
Yeah.
Out the switch.
Yeah. Yes, you are correct. You are correct.
And shift tab.
So it's control tab. Control
Oh,
tab.
control tab, yes.
Yeah. So you have to be aiming down the sights. Pressing control tab will switch you between direct fire and top down. Top down will score you the most damage on any armored vehicle because it hits it where the armor is the lightest. And the direct fire would be if you need to engage, well, pretty much underneath something, or if you're already in a position of height, and speed is more important than the most damaging hit. I think top down also works best for helicopters, but we'll have to do a little bit of experimentation with that later. That's pretty much all there is to the Javelin missile. Again, it's dead simple. I'm planning to use this as our next launcher for the next time we host the Nutters Joint Op. So we'll give it a go and see how we fare. We're gonna be minus the Apache, so this will be the only way we're capable of knocking out armored targets.
Javelin will be a little bit too easy to use.
I guess yes.
Don't look a Geforce in the mouth, man.
It is yes. It is very easy to use. And that, I mean, depending on the difficulty of the mission, like whether or not it's easy to use may become irrelevant if you run out of ammo, you know? So, I guess it just depends on mission difficulty and what tools have been handed to you. We may use the Carl Gustav or the Small instead. There's a little bit of a higher skill gap, but just like anything in Arma, once you've learned the tool, you've learned the tool. It's pretty much easy from that point forward.
Not only Arma, but okay.
What is quite annoying is that even though it takes quite a bit more skill to use something like the Small, it just simply, you have to hit like 2 or 3 times to drop a heavy tank.
Exactly. The Javelin is by far the most effective and easiest to use launcher that is present within Arma. In fact, perhaps even in real life. The thing about like the advancement of technology is that the things are supposed to be easier to use to make it easier to wage war, right? And I have criticisms about all that kind of stuff when it comes to gameplay perspectives, but I don't know. We'll play around.
It's realistic though. You can't deny that.
One thing you'll notice about the Javelin Nano when we start playing around with them is that it is a really cool rush of adrenaline to have that power backing you, and it's really awesome to watch the Javelin missile come out of the launcher, fly a few feet without doing anything, and then have the rocket engage and it just flies up and comes back down on top of a tank. It's sort of it explains why you see in a lot of those. What are the names of those like those war footage videos where the Americans seem to have so much like arrogance about the things they're doing? You know, like when you watch a Apache take out a target from ages away and everybody starts cheering, and you know, like guys are calling out the targets as shitheads or whatever. You know, it's because they have that backing, that arrogance. So yeah. Anyway,
one
sorry, I
thing
digress.
quick.
Yes.
The trade-off, guys, is the weight to carry the thing. But if we operate it as a crew, I think that's the sort of the best way to do it, because we get that teamwork aspect as well of having an assistant and everything.
Isn't there a laser-guided variant or something?
Pardon?
Isn't there like a laser-guided variant or anything like that?
I think
no,
there's
man.
I'm pretty sure there's a laser guide mode, but I don't know if it's simulated in Arma.
Its predecessor was that wire-guided one.
I'm not 100% sure, but probably very important to note is that the Javelin missile itself is incredibly heavy. You see, I've got the carry-all bag on, which is the second to biggest bag in Arma. It can only take one missile.
The freaking missiles are stupid.
And if
big.
you carry,
That's the only
trade-off. That's the
downside to
trade-off.
using a Javelin.
and if you had to carry a tube with a missile in it and one in the backpack, you're going to be lugging like 40-something kilos.
I think the Javelin's best employed with a vehicle to support it.
Yeah.
In most cases, we will be operating on foot, so you'll have what, like max 2 missiles on you. Which is the trade-off. The Small you could easily take 4 or 5. So if you're engaging light armor mostly, the Small actually becomes more effective than the Javelin.
That's 4 or 5 kills.
Yeah.
Isn't How does that Carl Gustav, the M4 version, compare to the small?
It's roughly the same. I think there's less of a dip in the flight travel or in the missile travel, but you'll notice that the Carl Gustav doesn't have the tracer magazine option that the small does, and that gives the small an edge at particularly high ranges, because the small the tracer rounds, I think it's a 9mm round.
Spotting round,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, it flies on the same path as the rocket, so you can effectively engage up to like what's it, 900 meters, 1,000 meters with the small, which you probably cannot do effectively with the cargo stuff.
If you remember that one airborne mission, I remember we shot that artillery piece like hella far, and we were spotting it with binos, the tracer rounds, and we got on the first kill with the small, like hella far away. So it does
Okay.
work.
Yeah, we can go give it a little test in the shooting range in a second. The last thing I want to cover before we go fiddle with launches and then do the actual mission is just I guess my opinion on how to deploy weapons teams. Again, this is my opinion, so if you're leading at the time, you can employ them differently. This is just something I want to say I noted with the last joint ops missions, but I wasn't there, so I couldn't experience it personally. I know Sheepy had troubles trying to coordinate everything. So I'm just gonna go over sort of tips and tricks really, and to how a weapons team is most effectively deployed. Um, so in any case, let us take let us let's propose that we're on the offensive in any given scenario. Let's say if everybody just takes a look at their map to around Saint Mary. It's southern end of the map just above Chapoy. There's a town there. I'm just gonna mark a BTR and let's say a T70. So when engaging a fortified position, perhaps it's controlled by vehicles, maybe there's infantry around. As a weapons or as a team that's built up of support elements, like we would be in any joint operation, it's best to employ us in, as the name suggests, a support role over the objective. Essentially, what that means is that we are the most effective when we are supporting a larger assaulting force. So in a joint operation scenario, Nutters would probably have a squad strength group, perhaps a squad and a half strength group. And given this scenario, let's say they're approaching through this nice forested area from the north. They don't have any heavy anti-tank capabilities, maybe a light launcher or something. So if they were in a position to engage, they could perhaps take out the BTR, but it's very unlikely they could take out the T70 or T72, whichever, or whatever. It's a big Russian tank that's sitting up on that hill. So, an overall, or perhaps just a support team leader, depending on your role, um, your your goal is to get into a position to either eliminate or suppress the threat to the point that the assault team is able to take it out. So let's say the support team starts in a similar position to the assault team. So support team, let's say we've maneuvered with the assault team into this position. Say we came from this valley over here to avoid detection. Um, we would be most effective from the high ground as a support team, especially with javelins and an MMG. The MMG specifically would be to suppress an enemy position. Um, so as a team leader, you have a couple of options. The first option would be to eliminate the T70 first, up on this hill over here, and take the hill. That offers a lower ground position. It's less likely to get suppressed from St. Mary when you've got this nice blind in front of you over here. Given a possible enemy contact in Chapoy, it's very easy to fall back over this way if you run into any trouble. But what that does mean is that your javelins aren't in effective range. You're way too close to hit the target that might be sitting there. So you'd have to employ some other means to take care of the tank. Alternatively, you could take your team up here to the top of the hill, where you would be most effective with a much wider field of view, and depending on how many javelin missiles you have present, could engage effectively both the targets present in the town and perhaps any additional targets that may come from the south, because you aren't really expecting armored targets to come over this lovely massive hill that's to the north here. Once you've gained a position, the high ground essentially, you're going to want to survey the area and then set up your teams in a way that's most effective to taking out a particular target. So the main ways to be most effective is obviously clear line of sight. So you're going to want to position perhaps around the rocks over here where there's a lot of viable cover and maybe some clear ground behind you so you don't kill yourself with Black Blast, to engage both the BTR and the T-70. So perhaps something like this little nook up here would be best effective because you've got a little bit of flat ground. You can maybe see over the rocks down into the town. In addition to that, you're going to need to set up the MMG, probably a little closer depending on what optics the MMG has available. But in most cases, what are we? Somebody's seen something funny.
Clip. What up, man?
What?
Clip is weaving. Anyway.
No. He has to show
Sorry,
the
I'm
crossfire.
on my phone.
He's
Get off
looking
your
at his
phone
phone.
in class.
Nice that you
Guys,
know you're paying
I'm trying
attention.
to lecture you. Jesus Christ, pay attention to your textbooks, children.
Sorry,
Anyway,
teach.
so if the MMG team does not, if the MMG operator himself doesn't have a long-range optic, generally the assistant will have binoculars of some sort, and you can essentially guide by fire using tracers. And for those who don't know what guide by fire means, it just means that with a pair of binoculars, you walk the gunner onto specific
left,
targets
up,
using the tracers.
left, too far right, left, up, up. You got it.
If done correctly, that is fuck effective.
Oh
Actually,
yeah.
We
Gunner,
do
keep
Remember the
walking forwards.
periscope,
Keep walking
Cortex?
forwards.
we do it all over the place, like in postscriptum even with the MG42 and a pair of binoculars. It's quite effective.
No, but we have done it before.
34's best.
Periscope, Cortex. Remember that?
Yeah, it was excellent, dude. It was brilliant on that road.
So
But most
again,
of the time we don't get
your
one
average
rhino.
MMG, I know the MG3 was a little bit of a battle the last join up, and I apologize for that, but your average MMG, so say the
it was actually not a bad
M240 Bravo
bet.
that Vino has available, or perhaps an M249. I know it's not quite an MMG, but it's close enough. You will set up somewhere in a position that offers prone support, because you're going to want to mount that bipod to kick back the extra recoil and whatnot. And then you're gonna your primary objective is really suppression. You can ideally you're eliminating targets, but if you can't see them, you want to keep their heads down and perhaps draw as much attention to us on the hill as we can to allow the support team to move in and sweep. There are obvious downsides to setting up on a hill like this. For one, evacing over the top is long. It takes quite a bit of time, and for the most part, you're going to be walking your way up there. So if we start to take heavy fire, say from Chapoy, which will have pretty much clear line of sight on that position, then you're in a lot of trouble. That's pretty much all there is to this use case, and I pretty much just spitballed most of that. So as a team leader, you're capable of pretty much setting up whatever you want to, in any position you want to set it up in. It's just important to remember where the support team strengths lie, and that is in base of fire and elimination of priority targets. Oh,
Could I add?
yes.
So,
Welcome to Mr. Fritz.
The issue I think that happens often is just on the coordination side. It will start off great, but then the fire team, the infantry, the fire team pushing the town, they move too fast, and they don't let the support element set up for the next engagement. And then there's this lag time, and then the fire team gets whacked because the support element wasn't there. That's what I feel like happened that joint up, because it started off good, and then we had to reposition, and then they were already wiped out.
Other thing I also find happening is sometimes the support team gets pushed in as an assault team, and that just is like,
that,
yeah.
That happened towards because we had to. We kind of had to push.
Yeah, that's a when needs must sort of thing. But
No,
but
other times I wasn't there for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you guys got to take a house as a support team, you got to do it. I mean, you still have rifles, right? You're still riflemen.
I'm talking about initially as an engagement starts, like the support team goes in as an assault team.
But then
fair. But yeah, just back to that coordination. That's the overall commander's deal, just to coordinate that. If he has to tell the fire team to stop moving, I mean, he better tell the fire team, you guys have to wait until the support team's ready to cover you.
Yeah,
That has to happen.
There will be obvious teething problems, especially when employing new tactics and with a group we don't play with all the time. But I think we're slowly but surely building coordination with the Nutters. So, ideally, if we employ this tactic more often than not, it may start to benefit. We'll start to see some proper results from it.
Just
But again, it's up to the CO really.
just to touch on the support teams,
Mhm.
they're not always a direct support element in the sense that they're tools for you to leverage as the commander. So, um, an MMG team, yeah, they can suppress targets and support the assault team, but they can also lock down sectors. They can hold approaches. They can hold open fields fairly well. A small team can do a lot. And the same goes for the weapons team. I mean, the heavy AT team. It doesn't necessarily have to be a static Overwatch position. It's a tool for you to leverage when you need it. So keep them in reserve. Keep them behind you, and you send them where they need to be at the time. It's just largely dependent on the scenario, I guess. Just
Absolutely.
don't get caught up thinking you have to deploy them somewhere before you use the assault team or something like that. You can do that obviously, but just think about it. Just think about how you can best leverage them, and if you don't see an immediate use for them, then keep them in reserve.
Makes sense.
Dave, you were saying something?
It also depends like what how we're gonna do it, like what era you're gonna to do it. We're doing it modern or stuff, because if you're gonna do it more World War II style, MG teams would be your spearhead in a way. If you go German.
You got a point, I suppose. It does depend on the era and what's available and stuff.
And
So
it also really depends on the CO's like command style really, because if he sees an opportunity to spearhead an assault with an MMG team, he's welcome to do it.
As
It just
long as it's coordinated, as long as that's the intention. It's not like, oh, well, the MG teams ended up at the front because the fire team's all dead and we didn't wait for them to recover.
yeah.
I think it's all good and well as long as there's that coordination. That was lacking, unfortunately, with the joined up the other night. The little bit I played until load shedding hit.
yeah,
Yep. Okay, good.
Anyway,
No, but that night there was a lot of things that were just going wrong. Load shedding. We were
No,
lacking
I
in
know. It's
we
just
were
like that
lacking
sometimes,
in
eh?
optics for the support team, and then the Nutters got too impatient.
yeah, no, things will go wrong. They always go wrong. Well,
And
what is
let's
it?
not
No,
even
no,
start
no
with the
plan
Apache.
survives first contact. So really, it's about trying to do the best you can with the tools you have available. Um, and I know not everybody here has really commanded that before. So again, this is not, and also I'm not trying to blame anybody or say anybody did anything wrong, because I don't think that was the case.
Oh, I did stuff wrong.
Well, except for Fritz. Fritz always gets things wrong.
Yeah.
But in any case, I just want everybody to try and learn and understand what happened and how they could maybe do it differently. Um, from their own perspective when they want to try as a commanding position later on down the line or whatever, because it is a lot of fun when things fall together properly. It's what's it from the A team. I love it when a plan comes together. It's like
Oh
it's one of
yeah.
the best feelings ever. So it's just something to think about and like if you can think of a better way to change an engagement, like write it down afterwards and talk to somebody about it and see if they're as excited as you are or whatever. But don't do it in a way that you're insulting somebody else. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, let us go play with some of the tools. There is a lovely little thing back there with extra ammo and s'mores and all of that fun stuff. I'm pointing
Ooh.
to it. It is behind you to the north. Go line up there and I'll set up some targets.